Dear participants, we'll begin shortly. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome back to the third and the last session of the day. It gives me immense pleasure to welcome our speaker for this session, Mr. Amrit Lal Bharadwaj. Before we begin, participants, please note, the session will be for 1 hour, followed by Q&A for half an hour. Please post your questions in the chat box and keep your video on throughout the session. Videos for all the session will be available on JUCMS YouTube channel. The link for the same is posted in the chat box. Over to Professor Varalakshmi. Ma'am, unmute.
Thanks for that, Shilpi. Mr. Amrit Lal Bharadwaj practiced as an accountant cum auditor from 1980 to 2003. After that, he joined academia for the past 14 years. He has taught accountancy and finance to postgraduate and final year undergraduates at Cardiff Business School, Cardiff University. In parallel, for the last 6 years, he's been visiting lecturer at JAIN deemed to be University, Bangalore, and last 3 years at Zhangnan University of Economics and Law, Wuhan. He's also a great mentor at Alacrity Foundation, Wales, UK, which helps to launch the tech startups. He is a chartered certified accountant, a fellow of Higher Education Academy, and holds a triple accredited MBA from an open university. After COVID pandemic is over, he intends to work and travel in various countries as a freelance lecturer. With immense honor and respect, I welcome Mr. Amrit Lal Bharadwaj to address the participants and the attendees. Sir will be sharing his insights on the topic, strategies to enhance employability skills for graduates. Over to you, sir. And thanks for waiting for such a long time. You were quite ahead, or you were present even before us, sir. Thank you so much. And sorry for keeping you waiting.
Namaskar, good afternoon to you all. It's 9:30 a.m. in the morning here, so there we go. Now, I don't want to share my screen with you, so how do we do this? I do not want to share the screen with you. You'll be able to see me, and I'll do the talk. Okay, that's great. Now, I'm just going to go on to my Word documents, if I may. Right, my talk is going to be about strategies to enhance employability skills of our graduates. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon to you all again. I'd like to thank JAIN University for inviting me to speak at this forum. I've sorely missed not having been able to make the annual visit in person to JAIN University's business school on account of the pandemic. The next best thing under the circumstances is to be with you online. So here I am. Before I begin, may I request that you ask me questions at the end of my talk? Chances are that I will have answered them during the course of my talk anyway. If I haven't done so, then please wait till I invite you to ask questions at the end. Right, I'm going to talk about enhancing employability skills of our graduates. I will in the main talk about how we achieve this in the United Kingdom. This same practice has been adopted in Europe as a broad framework resulting from the Bologna Process. I will quickly run through the Bologna Process. This was a process that was launched way back in 1999 by the education ministers of 29 European countries in an attempt to bring coherence to higher education systems across the continent. And over the years, the number of states who have now joined up to the Bologna Process has grown to 47, so it extends far beyond the current EU borders. So what is the Bologna Process? It's a framework to allow easy comparison between higher education systems of all participating countries. It covers quality assurance so that students, graduates, universities, and all of the stakeholders can be confident in the quality of different systems and the work of different providers. Now, I think this could equally be applicable in the Indian context, if it isn't already. Please enlighten me. I don't know if we have signed up to this process. However, let me begin. I will define the problem and suggest solutions to solve it. By the way, these are my personal views and observations, which have been born out of my personal experiences as an accountant cum auditor, firstly in commercial industry, secondly as a practitioner in private practice, and finally as a result of the past 14 years in academia. Please take on board that what I'm about to say and discuss are my personal points of view and mine alone. My talk is set against the backdrop of several years of personal teaching experience and a growing swell of clamor between academics and employers in Europe and other countries around the world. Now, it's becoming increasingly apparent that universities are turning out graduates who are not fit for purpose, meaning lacking in employability skills or who are not office ready. This in turn encumbers employers to incur time and huge expense in retraining the graduates to bring them up to speed to do their jobs effectively. So there seems to be a serious disconnect between what the economy needs and what the universities turn out. This is perhaps because there has been a breakdown in communications between the employers, between what the employers want to see in graduates and what the universities think employers would want to see in graduates. The two are completely different perspectives, and hence the problem. Now, as we move towards knowledge-based economies, student numbers have gone up worldwide, almost exponentially. This has increased student diversity, resulting in a variety of issues that need to be addressed. So let's look at what has been happening in recent times, and what is being done to address the problem. Problem? What problem? Is there a problem that needs to be addressed? The answer is an emphatic yes. What exactly is the problem? Well, employers have consistently complained about the poor quality of graduates. Meaning what? Well, employers say they're not up to the required standard expected of a university graduate. Standard? What standard? What is the standard required of a university graduate? Well, the standard of graduates required can be broadly explained in terms of graduate attributes or graduate outcomes. Graduate attributes or graduate outcomes? What are they? Graduate outcomes are outcomes of the total university experience. They include creativity, problem solving, professional skills, communication skills or soft skills, teamwork, and lifelong learning, all within the context of the particular degree a student is studying for. Let's go into more detail. Graduate attributes can be generic or embedded. The generic view of graduate attributes is that graduates will be creative or think critically, whatever the content they were dealing with. Hence, generic attributes are context-free qualities, as if graduates will be creative, whatever they do. On the other hand, embedded attributes or abilities are ways of handling issues that are context-dependent, so that creativity is only intended to apply in a graduate's content area. So why have universities failed to imbue or inculcate these qualities? Well, this is because universities have followed a teacher-led curriculum, simply listing topics that a teacher needs to cover. In comparison, an outcomes-based curriculum states what students will be able to do after teaching and how well they are to do it. That is, it is benchmarked. Thus, the attributes help the design of degrees and modules. The emphasis, therefore, is not on what topics to teach, but what outcomes students are supposed to have achieved after having been taught. Now, such constructive alignment, the intended learning outcomes are defined and assessments are criteria referenced to evaluate how well the outcomes have been achieved. So teaching and learning activities too are also aligned to the outcomes to enable students to achieve those outcomes more effectively. So in a nutshell, therefore, courses are designed with clear learning outcomes, which are aligned to the expectations of employers. Thus, universities will teach what employers want them to teach. Then they're on the same page. This will solve the problem of universities being disconnected with the expectations of employers. However, that is part of the problem. Leaving outcome-based teaching and learning aside, I want to spend some time to discuss issues relating to the question of maintaining standards, given the range of the ability of students, a common problem referred to as Robert and Susan problem. Now, I'm quoting from a book, Teaching for Quality at University, 4th edition by John Biggs and Catherine Tang. So let's discuss Susan first. Now, could I please share my screen with you and show you a couple of diagrams?
So you can share, sir.
Okay, here is the first diagram. And could you tell me if you can see it? Can you see that?
No, sir.
How do I get you to?
Sir,
I have to share my screen.
Sir, share screen option is down below, sir, in the ribbon. Share
Okay.
screen option, a green one, an arrow, upward arrow.
Yeah, okay. Right, and then share screen as, there we go. And that's what I want to share. You should be able to see it now.
No, sir, not able to see it.
Oh, beg your pardon. There we go. Can you see it now?
Yes, sir. Yes.
Okay. I'm just going to park that to a side. Now, here is the problem of Susan and Robert, taken again from this book, by the way. So give credit where credit is due. Now, effective teaching and learning for today's universities. This says at the bottom, student orientation, teaching method, and the level of engagement. Now, we have the Robert here and the academic Susan there. Trouble is, Robert isn't very academic, whereas Susan is. Robert just memorizes a few facts and takes a few notes and stops. He is a passive audience. It just sits in a standard lecture. Problem-based learning, not really. Whereas academic Susan covers all these qualities. So there's a big gap between high level of engagement and low level of engagement. And this gap is to be filled with learning activities, which are needed to achieve the intended learning outcomes. I'm going to go back to I'm going to stop this. How do I stop the screen share? Sorry, bear with me. Have I stopped sharing?
Yes, sir. You've stopped sharing, sir.
Okay. So I should have gone to the diagram subsequently. I made a mistake. I should have discussed the problem first. Okay, I do apologize. Let's discuss Susan first. Now, Susan is academically committed. She is bright, interested in her studies, and wants to do well. She has a clear academic or career path, and what she learns is important to her. When she learns, she goes about it in an academic way. She comes to the lecture with a sound, relevant background knowledge, possibly with some questions she wants answering. In the lecture, she finds an answer to a profound question. Now, this is what's important. It forms the keystone for a particular arch of knowledge she is constructing. Or it may not be the answer she's looking for, and she speculates, wondering why it isn't. In either event, she reflects on the personal significance of what she's learning. Now, students like Susan virtually teach themselves. They do not need much help from us lecturers. Now, academics like Susan's were indeed like Susan's themselves. So they tend to assume that she represents how most students learn, and so teach them accordingly. That is a fatal flaw. That is a fatal flaw. And this is where we're going wrong. Now let's consider Robert. He is at university, not out of driving curiosity about a particular subject or a burning ambition to excel in a particular profession, but to obtain a qualification, to procure a decent job. A few years ago, students like him would have never considered going to university. He is less committed than Susan, possibly not as bright academically speaking. He has little background of the relevant knowledge. He comes to lectures with no or few questions. He wants only to put in sufficient effort to pass the exams and to be able to earn his bread and butter. Now, here is the important point. This is really important. Robert hears the lecturer's same words as Susan is hearing, but he doesn't see the keystone, but just another brick to be recorded in his lecture notes. He believes that if he can record enough of these bricks and can remember them, he will be able to pass his examinations. Students like Robert are in the higher proportion in today's classes, regrettably. They need help if they are to reach acceptable levels of achievement and in turn, meaningful and gainful employment. Now, to say Robert is unmotivated may be true, but it is unhelpful. All it means is that he is not responding to the methods that work for Susan, the likes of whom was sufficiently visible in most classes in the good old days to satisfy us that teaching did work. But of course, it was the students who were doing the work and getting the results, not our teaching. So the challenge for us as lecturers is to teach so that Robert learns more like Susan. So I'm going to go back to the diagram again. if I may, I need to share my screen. Share screen.
Yes, sir, the same procedure, sir.
And I have lost it.
Share screen option at the below ribbon. The green upward arrow.
You have done that.
Yeah.
Share screen.
Yes, sir. And click on.
I can't see, but I can't see my screen. Sorry, I do apologize.
So if you close the other tabs which are open and which is relevant.
Here we are.
Yeah.
Can you see my screen now?
No, sir.
Okay, wait a second. There we go. Sorry, so I'm back to the diagram. I should have, now that you've got a better understanding of the non-academic Robert and the academic Susan, Robert is a passive learner, does want to do the absolute minimum. So his level of achievement is that, whereas Susan is academic and she works to the right of the curve as an active learner. Now, what we need to do is between this dotted line and that dotted line, we need to create learning activities to pull Robert up by the bootstraps and bring him up to the level of Susan to achieve the intended learning outcomes. Now, I'm going to share one more diagram with you, which is this one. Go back to share. Resume share. Where is?
Amrit sir, stop share screen option.
Yep.
Again, share the relevant documents, sir.
Well, there's a new share, and this is the new share. Here we go. Okay, here we go. Now, I'm just going to, this diagram again is reproduced in the book in subsequent pages. It says the desired and actual level of engagement, approaches to learning and enhancing teaching. Now, I take it you would all see this? Page 29?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, you have Robert here who starts to memorize, goes there and stops. Susan carries on from there right up to there, and she reflects on what she's doing. So Susan acquires deep learning, whereas Robert acquires surface learning. And the challenge for us lecturers is to supply activities to support these missing activities. And we need to discourage that kind of learning. That's the problem. So, okay, I'm going to get back, come out of this stop share and go back. Oh, goodness, man. Close this, close this. Right. You should only be able to see me now and not my screen.
Yes, sir.
Am I right? Okay, good. So having shown you the two diagrams, now, if I may carry on with the Susan and Robert problem. Now, bearing in mind that there are Susans and Roberts in the lecture hall, we need to design learning activities that will close the gap between them, enabling them to achieve output-based learning outcomes and develop and hone graduate attributes, stroke outcomes. To close the gap between Susan and Robert, we need to design learning activities. Obviously, defining learning outcomes and learning activities will depend on a particular degree, subject that's being studied. Now, I will use accountancy as an example. This methodology can be replicated to teach other subjects and disciplines, particularly if they have a practical application. So let's take students studying for the ACCA qualification, which I've been closely involved with. Say I'm teaching financial and management accounting, taxation and auditing exams. My modus operandi is, by the way, I was given a free hand to design, deliver and assess modules. Now, I have tried it over the past few years. I haven't perfected it. I have improved it as a reflective practitioner, and I am getting there with increasingly outstanding results, even if I say so myself. Sorry, but it's true. First and foremost, place students at the heart of learning. It has to be student-centered learning. In what way is my methodology different? What I do is I give students a helicopter view of the topic, a skeletal overview, and I get them to flesh in the details from a core textbook. A core textbook. So, for example, here is the ACCA course manual, revision and practice kits. Now, these are published by BPP University, valid for both papers, computer exams, for exams September, December, March 20, and June 20. And you have free access to ebook and additional digital content. I will come back to that. This includes everything. So I get them to work through ACCA's past examination papers under exam conditions and compare the answers with suggested answers from the ACCA, get students to a level of exam readiness so that they are familiar with exam technique and they are not strangers to exam style questions to ensure benchmarking to a world-class qualification. That is the key. So they work through the workbook and the practice of the revision kit under their own steam. So you get them to critically evaluate also. In addition, I get them to evaluate annual reports of publicly quoted companies on stock markets from around the world. PLCs, for example, Jaguar Land Rover, Rolls-Royce, Marks & Spencer's, Toyota, mainly multinationals, which brings together these different strands of learning into a solid body of knowledge, and thus progress towards the apex of the learning pyramid and clearly connecting theory to practice. They must be able to connect what they're learning to what's happening out in the big world, because the employers are in the big world. Now, I also, in addition, teach them accounting, tax, and auditing software so that they hit the ground running when they join the big audit firms such as the PwCs of the world, or even if they went to work for a small to medium-sized firms or SMEs. So let's get back to the problem. Why have we turned out poor quality graduates? Now, my opinion, the worst thing that we lecturers have done in the past few years is use Microsoft PowerPoint. In doing so, we have spoiled our students rotten. It's entirely our fault. Students now expect the lecturer to read the topics out of a textbook, summarize them in 15 to 20 PowerPoint slides. In compliance with the wishes of the student, the lecturer gives them PowerPoint handouts. Students, particularly Roberts, scribble a few notes on them during lectures. Only those who are paying attention and not playing with their iPhones is merely Susans who are paying any attention. Roberts don't bother looking at the handout again until the exam time. Near the exam time, Roberts wonder what the topic was all about. Result, students achieve superficial knowledge as a result of surface learning, and so produce hazy exam answers. I often lose the will to live by the time I get to the 5th exam answer script. The overall result at the end of the 3-year degree is that our graduates leave university with half-baked ideas and knowledge, which is frankly more dangerous than ignorance. I then wonder why employers are so disappointed with the quality of our graduates. I also speak out of experience as an employer of university graduates with degrees in accountancy and finance who cannot prepare a simple set of accounts using principles of double entry bookkeeping, and that after 3 years at a business school. Their recall of basic concepts is woefully poor. This problem of surface learning is further aggravated by open textbook assignments and rampant plagiarism and dissertation mills, where dissertations are churned out anonymously by experts for a fee. So what's the solution? If you ask me, it's quite simple. Bring back the core textbook and out with the PowerPoint presentation handouts. Now, I'm now a part of a growing number of like-minded lecturers and professors advocating this. We're a small group, but we're getting bigger by the day. So having given the students the basic nuts and bolts of the topic during the lecture, get them to read the topic in detail from the assigned core textbook. And then to test their understanding of the topic, get them to attempt the questions at the end of the chapter. Continuous assessment will be the order of the day, but this will be self-assessment, getting students to take full ownership of their learning, not the lecturer playing mummy and spoon-feeding them. This encourages self-reflection in students. They learn to be honest with themselves. I often ask my students, can you look at yourself in the mirror, look yourself in the eye and ask yourself, have I really thoroughly understood the topic under discussion? And if you cannot be honest with yourself, then you cannot be expected to be honest with anyone. And there is no hope for you, buddy. So students will be required to work through the core textbook throughout the academic year and appear for an examination from the questions from the end of the chapter bank of questions. As a result, students know what they are in for and the standard required of them. They will have read their core textbook cover to cover. Besides, most textbooks are now interactive with resources for both the lecturers and students. Now, these resources reinforce learning and test the level of understanding, which helps to gauge if learning is actually taking place. Those students who diligently work through the textbook will learn and remember the subject matter because deep learning will be taking place as opposed to surface learning. This is what we need to do to replace teaching by PowerPoint, which frankly ought to be banned in my opinion, but that's my opinion. We need to spare students from death by PowerPoint. Now, one can only build upon the pyramid of knowledge if the foundation of that pyramid is wide and sound, not if it's narrow, hazy, and superficial. I will not give you examples of the type of the core textbooks that we as lecturers could use. Please note, I said examples, I'm not recommending them. So, for example, on the subject of innovation, here we are. Here is a core textbook on innovation and includes an interactive ebook. Now, it says at the back, it's a best-selling text for MBA, MSc, advanced undergraduate courses on innovation management, management of technology, new product development, and entrepreneurship. It is really fantastic. Now, it's got easily navigate your ebook using chapter menus, search and bookmark options. You can save notes and voice annotations as a reminder of key points. Watch video clips to bring the case studies alive and expand your understanding of issues. Try out the activities and tools to develop your skills. And anyway, it is used by top universities around the world: MIT, Harvard Business School, McKinsey & Company, Sorbonne, Paris, Grenoble, France, Imperial College, University of London, University of Oxford, Instead, London Business School, Judge Institute of Management, University of Cambridge, Hanlon Management College, University of Pretoria, South Africa, and global companies such as Marconi, PLC, and Procter & Gamble. Now, my point is, if it is good enough for them, then it is good enough for us, and we can learn from it for a fraction of the cost of having to travel, live, and learn at these world-class institutions. We can stay in our country and excel just as well. We need to believe in ourselves. We are second to none. Now, here's the deal. We can benchmark the standard of our education and that of our graduates to the best class universities and be competitive in the global economy. We can do it and are going to do it. Now, innovation is the twin brother or sister of entrepreneurship. Take your pick. Here again, here is a book on entrepreneurship with clearly stated outcomes, practice insights, case insights, activities, group discussions, an interactive ebook, a companion website, teaching resources, and learning resources all in one place. It has a host of real case studies and meet the entrepreneurs section. It beautifully ties a theory to practice in the real world. And in my next example, I'll show you a book that I use for my accountancy students. Now, here is a book on international financial reporting standards. It too has a common website for open access student resources, as well as lecture resources tailored to support the use of the book in teaching. It is used by professional accountancy bodies the world over, and these standards have been adopted by over 140 countries around the world. Now, companies quoted on the stock markets must prepare accounts in accordance with these standards to enable uniformity and enhance comparability between companies on stock markets. The only exception is the United States, which has been procrastinating adoption of the standards for one reason or another. I will not go into their whys and wherefores to adopt these standards. But going back to my accountancy and finance students, here again, as a lecturer, I give them an overview of a topic. They go away and read up on it, make notes, do the questions at the end of the chapter. If they get them right, then they have understood the theory and can apply it to a given ACCA exam standard question. Come the professional exam, they have mastered these standards and can be examined on a selection of them, which equates to deep learning, and thus pass it with flying colors. Now, this is how we produce world-beating graduates who have taken full ownership of their learning and aligned it to what is required of them by employers to survive the cut and thrust of the real world. In other words, by the time they leave university, they will have achieved the learning outcomes or acquired the so-called graduate attributes by doing the learning activities and are now ready for the world of work. We will have thus closed the gap between Susan and Robert, both leaving university thoroughly grounded in deep learning. We can provide our undergraduates a very clearly signposted roadmap at the very start of their journey of learning. These are the core textbooks you're going to learn from. We will give you a flavor or an overview of the topics, but you will be at the heart of learning. You will be at the center of learning. You will do 80% of the work, if not more, and take full ownership of your learning. You will not kid yourself, as you will be monitoring your own progress all the way through your degree. So grow up fast. If you fail at the end of the year-end exam, you fail that module and will have to reset that examination again. We will closely monitor your progress every step of the way and support you. Now, so that's that. Now, I want to discuss another facet of the problem, of the same problem. Now, this is a particularly important caveat for the university chancellors and the powers that be to consider. Now, in order to achieve all of the above that I've discussed, we need to ensure that lecturers are up to speed. And with it, lecturers must be given time off to study the latest core textbooks. This is to ensure students are taught current paradigms. Books change every 2-3 years. Now, I have come across far too many institutions that are not changing textbooks in donkey's ears. Teaching old hat is a simply big no, no, no. And yet, dare I say, it happens far too often. Also, lecturers must never being the operative word here, never be burdened with administrative duties. They should be just responsible for learning, teaching, and pastoral care of students under their charge. Administrative duties thrust upon lecturers is emotionally draining and a sheer waste of their precious time. Right, I have said enough. To summarize then, we need latest interactive core textbooks in place of laconic teaching via PowerPoint slides. Place students at the heart of learning to enable deep learning to take place. Tie up learning outcomes to home graduate attributes outcomes with employers' expectations. We universities must take the blame for the situation we currently find ourselves in. We need to stop the blame game. We are the problem. That said, we can also be the solution to the problem. If we do not change, we will simply produce more of the same. By the way, I've heard rumors that change is the only constant in life. We need to do some serious soul searching. I've offered possible solutions to bridge the gap between academia and industry, which I have tried and tested in the past few years, and which, hand on heart, I can say have worked very well. Thank you. Happy to take your questions now.
Participants, you can post your questions in the chat box.
Do you want me to go through them or? Right, so good afternoon, and something. Okay, I hope my screen is shared now. Or I will give you, I can send you the details of the books. It seems as though I've traumatized you. What do you think? I've told you what I think.
Any questions? Please post it in the chat. Okay, so we have a question from Trupti Ahuja. She asks, I have a very small suggestion and a question as well. If not the presentation mode, then how do you teach to make it much better interactive session between a teacher and a student?
Let me gather my thoughts on that. What I do, I can only tell you what I do. One, I give the skeletal overview of the topic. The students go and do the work. They come back and say, this, they're not clear on this, they're not clear on that. And that's where the interactive session takes place. We deal with problem areas. Does that answer your question?
I hope so, sir. We have another question from Finu Jose. What is your opinion on ranking? It is a real gamble worth taking?
I take it you're referring to global rankings of universities or ranking within India?
It is about the ranking of the students, I think, sir. I think mostly it is about that we are talking about. So they're referring to Susan and the Robert kind of a ranking where...
Okay, let me answer it slightly differently. It's been my experience that over the years, and the experience of very, very senior lecturers at different universities where I've taught, that because there are so many Roberts in the lecture hall, standards have been dumbed down. And with the result, there are more Roberts going into the world with very superficial knowledge. And we need to address that. The only way we can do it is we bring in these learning activities from core textbooks. Textbooks are now being written in this particular way. It's to get the students to do the work. What I'm telling you is nothing new. I mean, this book was published in 1999. I mean, the Bologna Process started in 1999. So 2021 years later, 22 years later, we're still doing the same thing. You know, universities are like super tankers. For them to do a U-turn takes a long time. But we hear all this and we say, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. But do we do it? No. Why? Search me, I don't know. There is reluctance to change. We're set in our ways. People say to me, do you really want to upset the apple cart? Hey, chaltana, chalne, and that sort of attitude. That will not cut any ice in the long run. We're letting our students down, if you ask me. Did I answer that question, or are you still?
I don't think so. It is satisfying to many of us, sir. Because anyways, the university is asking for the ranking as such. So there is, again, what you said is a blame game that is going on. So we really don't know what could be the best solution for, to adapt, because the university comes with the set norms. So Rachna asks one question here. Can you possibly summarize the best method of bringing the gap between Susan and Robert to one particular average?
Go through the core textbook cover to cover. No exceptions. This is what you have to do for professional accountancy exams. You cannot say, I'm going to pick that topic and leave the rest. Hotspotting topics will not get you through the exam. You really must. I mean, a doctor needs to know everything. A lawyer needs to know all the law. So why should accountants be any different? Or an engineer, for that matter. You know, what we're doing is we are On our courses, we have a variety of options, and the knowledge we're giving is a spoonful of this and a tablespoon of that, but it's very superficial to be of any use. Besides, the students forget them within 6 months of leaving university. Teaching pedagogy. Teaching, as you all know, is an art. What works with you? If your students are flying through their exams and getting good results, you must be doing something right. If they don't, then you are not. Then there's something not quite right with your teaching, and you need to do some soul searching and really say, hey, this isn't working. This is working for my students. This is what being a reflective practitioner is all about. Did that work? Did the students enjoy that? Did they get that? When I say give a helicopter view of a topic, I mean deal with the crux of the topic. So they have a clear understanding what's at the heart of the matter. Once they've got that basic principle right, and they're in the right ballpark, they just have to go and fill in the details, fashion the details themselves. And they do that from the core textbook, not from PowerPoint slides. You can't possibly put that into PowerPoint slides on each of those topics. And even if it did, how do you know learning is taking place? How do you know learning is taking place? That's the biggest challenge when you're lecturing. How do you know your students are not fast asleep with their eyes wide open? I'm always asking students, what do you think? What do you think? What do you think? And they have to stay alert. And you can tell straight away by some of the answers they give you, well, you haven't read that in the textbook, have you? I don't know how far you've got in that chapter. And it keeps them on their toes. And you tell them, look, if you want to pass the exam, do what I tell you. And it works, unless you keep them on their toes. Don't pussyfoot around students, otherwise they'll take over. And they do try and take over the class.
Nayak Sharada wants to ask you a question, sir.
Yes, sure.
Hello, sir.
Hello there.
I want to ask you a thing, like you said about the PowerPoint, but most of the universities require the teachers to use the information communication tools. I do agree that, many a times blackboard teaching is what would help, and, it doesn't make students look just at those points which have been put on the PowerPoint. So what is your take on the other ICT, or what would you recommend other than the PowerPoints to be used by the teachers? Because that's what these universities require these days. Thank you.
Well, universities are wrong. They need to rethink. And I've never used PowerPoints presentations at all. And I can tell you, in all honesty, well, I'm always honest, my students have never said, oh, why aren't you giving us a PowerPoint handouts? The lecture is very intensive. It's a 2-hour lecture. I do most of the talking. I engage students continuously. And I tell them, for every 1 hour you spend with me, you will have to spend 3 hours on your own. That is the ratio. If you don't do that, you're setting yourself up to fail. We've gone so soft in the head dealing with students and student surveys and students satisfaction surveys. It's just nonsense. And this ranking of universities, I don't really care. If you've read a world-class book that's used by top universities around the world, you're just as good as them. What's the problem? We don't need to prove ourselves to anyone. Look at all the foreign exchange we'll save, by students not having to go to these universities. We can do it ourselves. And to do it, we need to train the lecturer first. The lecturer needs to be given time off to read this, assimilate it, understand it, so he can say, when he's asked a student a question, he say, go to this page, it's there. Why haven't you read it? And that inspires confidence in students. I don't want lecturers using the same lecture year in, year out, year in, year out. And I've seen this happen again and again. And then on top of that, they're burdened with administrative duties. Come on, I'm a lecturer, not an administrator. And this is what universities, the management of the universities must understand, this guy's a lecturer and that guy's an administrator. Separate the two. There is this overlap, which is just nonsense. Sorry, I missed that. I'm just quickly going to read that.
Can I move on to the next question, sir?
Yeah, sure. Can I just ask about this thing about social media? Now, I tell students when I start my lecture, please switch off your phone, and the operative word is off. I'm going to give you 30 seconds to switch it off. And my God, you should see the reaction. Oh, you don't mean it, do you? Yes, I do. And if your phone rings, I will take it off you. And if you ever make that mistake again in my lecture, I will throw it out the window. And that's a promise and a threat. And I don't get any nonsense. And I also tell them, put it in your bag where you can't see it. This is a weapon of mass distraction. This is ridiculous. And I asked them, what does the I stand for in the iPhone? Can anybody tell me what does the I stand for?
Idiot.
Well done. Well done. That's for idiots.
I think we think alike on this.
Sir Chandra Vishwas wants to ask you a question. Ma'am, you can go ahead.
Good afternoon, sir. So my question is how to meet with student expectation, because they are getting the exact same thing you're talking about. Like other faculties are allowing iPhones and like any kind of phone in the classroom. They're giving notes, and kids have this idea that a good class is supposed to be where they will be spoon fed. So when I'm trying anything out of that, they are retaliating. And how to deal with that? There are scenarios.
I tell you recently, and I've done this almost every year, and I've warned a couple of students at times, if you don't misbehave, if you continue to misbehave, I will ring your parents and tell them to take you out of the university because that's wasting their money on you. We've got to take control. I don't want to say the lunatics are taking over the asylum, but sometimes it feels like that. You cannot be bullied. Oi, look who's in charge here. Just say to them, stop talking when I'm interrupting. I am the lecturer. And you will not talk. But we are too scared of the top management is one area. We're far too afraid to challenge them and say, well, why are you thinking like that? Dare I say, a lot of this is very true of British universities, we survive on the fees paid by overseas students. We have become cash cows. We are businesses, we are very afraid to fail them. Because if we fail them, we won't have any students next year, and I'll be made redundant. So it's a ridiculous, vicious cycle, and it's a downward spiral of standards.
Failing them it's like thought of failing them is it's like a mistake on our side. Like every time I will hear from my bosses that you cannot have this many people failing, and you have to set your question paper according to the level of the class, not to the level where they should be reaching at the end of the class. So that's kind of become a phenomenon in the institute all over.
It's nonsense. Why do you let people drag you down into the gutter? You're supposed to be pulling them out of the gutter. You tell your boss, he or she needs to have their head examined. I wouldn't be afraid to go nonsense. What kind of a boss is he? And a lot of the time, management are not teachers. They've never stood in front of a classroom, and they tell you, oh, you go and do this. Well, you try doing it. And the answer is, but I'm not a lecturer. Yeah, I know you're not a lecturer. So why are you telling me? Why do you tell me how to lecture?
Okay, so I think Chandrakala Vishwas has got the answer from there. Harita Shri asked, what kind of sessions, apart from the case studies, as a teacher can inculcate in the class to enhance the skills, at least during this pandemic situation, to have the attention of the students?
Right. Okay. Let me answer that I'll tell you what I do. When I mentioned I get students, if you've learned your accounting ratios, as an example, I say, right, go and analyze Jaguar Land Rover's accounts for the last 5 years. Tell me what has their historical performance been over the last 5 years. Tell me where are they at now. And if you were the CEO of Jaguar Land Rover, how would you take this company forward in the next 5 years? What would be your strategic plan? What would be your operational plan? What would be your strategies, your financial strategies, your business strategies, your marketing strategies? So all the different topics we teach on the MBA come into focus. And it's a group exercise. You get them to do one case every fortnight. By the end of the year, they've done about 20, 30. That's how they teach at Harvard. Case studies. It's only if you've mastered your textbook and you've done that, will you be able to intelligently analyze Jaguar Land Rover or Rolls-Royce or any company you want to pick up. And you tell them, look, that's the real world out there. Are you capable of understanding consolidated accounts? Do you understand what a cash flow statement is? Do you understand the meaning of free cash? And I've done it on the executive MBA, and it works. I recently did this, and I've done this for 2 years running in Wuhan, China. And my word, they were fantastic. I set exams for them. And I told the Chinese, this is not a test in English. This is not a test of English grammar. This is an accounting paper. If you get the numbers right, you get full marks. And more than half the class scored 100 marks out of 100. And I think the lowest mark was about 80%. So it's doable, it's deliverable, it works. It's worked for me. It can work for you. And you know what? Students are buzzing with happiness and say, wow, we did a great job. We can analyze a PLC. You know, doing just accounting ratios, and then for 2 years in an exam question, well, this ratio is better than last year, and this one's deteriorated. Big deal. You've learned nothing. It's completely out of context, and it's superficial learning. If you can't apply that knowledge in the real world, then you can't. I'll give you another example with qualified accountants. You know, I ask them what depreciation is, and I get a textbook definition. Oh, it's the loss of value through use of an asset and blah, 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 or what its working life. Yeah, I know that. You're stating the obvious. But have you made any provision to replace the asset at the end of the 4 years? I don't know, maybe we'll get another loan. That's the level of knowledge. And you say, you are such a bozo of an accountant. You just understand the basic concept of depreciation. You should have set aside money over the 4 years and funded the asset yourself, not be in perpetual debt to a bank. Now that's what's missing. I'll give you another example, if I may. When I was in my practice, I would get invited I would be asked by my clients, Amrit, we're recruiting our finance director. Could you join the interview panel to discuss, to check his technical knowledge? So we've had 100 applicants. We've whittled them down to 10, and now down to 5 come on this particular. So when we are interviewing these 5 candidates, I asked them questions like, so tell me what is CVP about? And the reaction is CVP? Oh, it's something to do with cost, volume, price. And I say to them, are you asking me or telling me? CVP. And I say to them, look, here is a pen. How would you explain CVP to a 10-year-old, your kid brother? How would you explain CVP to a 10-year-old? And they start talking in circles, start talking about cost, behavior. And I say to them, I didn't know costs misbehaved. And that's it, kills the conversation. Look, when you're explaining that to a 10-year-old, cost, how much will this pen cost to make? Volume, how many of these shall I make? And P stands for the amount of profit this one pen is going to contribute towards the bottom line. That's what a 10-year-old will understand. Now, that's what soft skills are all about. So when you talk about activity in classrooms, we discuss the topic in that way. Can you explain it to a 10-year-old? And if you can, you have mastered your topic. But if you can't, and if you're talking with marbles in your mouth, blah, 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 and I'm like, blah, 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 and I'm like, you're like what? That's the issue. Man, we need to kick, students need a good kicking. And you know what? Once you start producing graduates like that, I can bet you my bottom rupee, employers will be queuing outside our university to recruit our students. They'll say, well, these kids from this university are taught in depth and they're on the ball. And as a university, we can charge them top dollar to come in, recruit the best. You know, and if people don't perform, they bring down others. And that's the other thing. You need to be, I'm very, very careful about students like that. You know, they will do, you know, bone-eyed lazy robots, as I call them. They won't do anything and they won't let others around them do any work. You need to weed them out very quickly. Otherwise, it just destroys the atmosphere in the classroom.
So we have a question from Morlin.
Yes.
Yeah. Morlin, you can unmute and ask a question.
Yeah. Sir, it was wonderful insight that you shared with us. Usually what I find in the Indian system, what we do is we help them to vomit, in a sense of vomit what they have studied. No, that is number one. Number two, even if you help them to have a reflective oriented outcome, the students still feel that, you know, something is lacking because they are not studied enough, even in the reflective mode. One, my observation is, even if we as a faculty members have to be educated first in terms of how to use ITC, how to engage students with the multiple options like, for example, case studies and using quizzes and so on and so forth. The other side of the coin, Indian system does not come along a long way like a Western, where, you know, the individual studies, individual write-ups are more important, but rather we are more focused on that system. So that is one thing that I want to share with you. Apart from that, I want to ask you is, when you engage your students might have been a combination of various nationalities, right? How do they take it up, the challenge of studying together as well as studying in a private way? How do they enhance their skill?
Well, very interesting. There's several questions there, but let me refer to the body of accountancy students. Now, the first thing I tell my students that accountancy is a neutral subject. 2 + 2 is equal to 4. You can do it in any country, you can do it in any language. So therefore, keep your politics and your religion out of my classroom. That's the first thing. You know, 2 + 2 divided by 2 is 3. And they start to wonder. So accountancy is very neutral subject. Now, so regardless of the nationality, the level of interest is the same. I am colorblind. I am blind to the country you come from. I teach, and if you can get your accounts right, you get full marks. That's part of the issue. So students feel that they're all on an equal footing. Some will work faster than others. For example, when I teach how to do cash flow forecasts in Excel and projected accounts, or when I'm teaching an accounting software, some people are pretty computer literate and I'm not. And so some people will learn things very quickly, others will not. So it's these people I spend most of the time with. But I make sure the whole class moves together in unison before I tackle the next topic. Don't leave anybody behind. You mentioned the Indian system, but I'd like to share something with you. When I was in China the first year, that's 3-4 years ago, a Chinese professor said to me, you know, your Indian universities are fantastic, And I said, why do you say that? He said, wow, look at all the top 10 companies in America. They're all headed by an Indian. So you guys are bright. And I smiled. I hope you're smiling too. We Indians are pretty good. We underrate ourselves. All we got to do is re-examine how we do things. You're right. We're learning by rote. We regurgitate an exam. We think an examination is a test of memory. It isn't. It's a test of your critical thinking. The example that I just gave you, the exam that I sent, I tell my students, I'm going to tell you what I'm going to ask you in the exam. I'm going to ask you to analyze a PLC of your choice. Show me that you've learned, you've got the knowledge to do it, and you can think critically. You can take Jaguar Land Rover forward in a constructive, useful way and make it a profitable company. You don't have to test people's memory. That's not education. That's not education at all. And it's this that needs to change. And if you can't think critically, if you can't think on your feet and take executive decisions on the hoof, and you're not responsive to market conditions. I mean, look at the stock market; it goes up and down all day. You know, you've got to be on your feet. I'm sorry I answered that question in a roundabout way. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, you answered. Yes, yeah.
I hope so.
Mr. Kadir Pasha is asking a collective question from all the faculty. That is to please suggest a technique to grab the attention of students during online classes. We all feel that they are acting rather than learning, though their videos are on. They are just acting, but then we don't know whether they're listening to us or it's just they are acting, they're posing that they are listening to all of our lectures.
It's very difficult, and I'm being honest with you. It's a real challenge unless the university adopts an ethos of we're going to charge you a lot of fees for which we will give you a quality education. But to acquire that quality education, the deep learning education, you're going to have to do the work. And if you're not prepared to do it, go to another university. You know, we have to say this in our mission statement. This is what we're about. There's only one Oxford and there's only one Cambridge. And these universities, and we've got these few IT institutes and management institutes in India, which turn out fantastic people. And we lose them to America. You know, they're running NASA, they're running these top 10 companies. All we got to do is replicate the business model further right across India. We know the problem, we've got the solution. It just needs to be rolled out. Don't let, you see, students are brought up, when I say students, I mean, kids have been brought up by television, not parents. That's the first thing. Then they're brought up by, then they're heavily influenced by Hollywood and Bollywood, you know. Am I right? When a parent says something, you know, they say, tumhe kya pata hai, we know it all. Really? I've seen more days than you. That's what I tell my students. You see this gray hair? Show a little respect. And if you don't want to, leave. You have to be able to say that. And the university must support you. I remember when I first started teaching in Britain, I kicked out a very disruptive student who used to put his arm around his girlfriend, and they used to sit like that. So I said, will you please sit straight? And he wouldn't listen. And he kept interrupting me. And I said, if you interrupt me again, Chris, I will ask you to leave. And he interrupted me, and I kicked him out of the classroom. I was pulled up before the principal, and they said, you can't do that. There's bums on seats for every student we have in the classroom. We get paid so much per capita, which in turn pays your salary, Mr. Bardwaj. So I kissed them goodbye. So my life's too short to be wasted on clowns like that. You know, if the guy doesn't want to learn, he doesn't want to learn. So I'm saying that, you know, we need to have an honest discussion, a grown-up conversation with the management of the university. What is it that we're trying to achieve? We're trying to uplift India. Atam Nirbhar is what we're trying to achieve, which is going to be my lecture on the 25th and 26th and the forthcoming conference. This is what we need. Either we get serious and start competing with China. I've been to China, man. We're surrounded by China and way ahead of us. I'll give you a simple example. I don't want to go into politics. You know, they have an attack helicopter. We're having to buy one. You know, they all our defense equipment we're purchasing, and they can make it indigenously. So I'll let you draw your own conclusions. Think about it. Think about it.
So my next question would be like, many of the courses have incorporated accounts and mathematics as the subject, one of the core subjects. But if you see the students, most of them are very fearing for these particular numbers. So how do you suggest that we can bring this, the gap between the learning for numbers, and how do we actually achieve to, inculcate the habit of learning math and accounts, because they fear for these particular subjects?
Can I correct a fallacy? Accountancy is not mathematics. Accountancy is kindergarten arithmetic. We add, we subtract, we occasionally divide, and we sometimes multiply to calculate a percentage. But apart from that, we don't need maths. This is not calculus or applied maths. This is a misnomer. And then Excel has all those functions. I mean, they've even taken the thinking out of arithmetic. What could be simpler? You know, so I'm not a mathematician. You don't have to be a mathematician to be an accountant. They think, oh, you've got to have a talent for it. No. Accounting is critical thinking, making sense of numbers. Yeah. We've made a profit. How can we improve the profit next year? If we made a loss, well, we'd better stop making losses or we'll be out of business. It's those thinking. It's executive decisions. You know, MBA, Master of Business Administration. What does MBA stand for? It stands for you have mastered the art of how to administrate a business. And to do that, you've got to be very good at accounting. You've got to be very good at marketing, HR, and all those other subjects which are brought together. But what I'm saying is those subjects are being taught at a very, very superficial level. I'd rather be taught 3 or 4 subjects, but in depth. By that, I mean less is more. And you will turn out a far better graduate than the ones we're turning out now, even within the UK. This substandard, almost next to nothing, you know, I won't say get in a lot of trouble. Get in a lot of trouble.
Yeah. So Punit Razdan is asking a question. It's actually your perspective on this particular query that he's asking. The trend these days is to make classrooms learner-centered rather than teacher-centered. So what's your perspective on this?
Very much so. I've been banging on about it. Everything's got to be student-centered learning. This is what must penetrate the student's head. You're going to do the work, not me. I tell my students, I'm not a lecturer, I'm a traffic cop. I will tell you, go straight, take the third one on the left and the second one on the right, and you're on the road to success. And to do that, and there's the roadmap. Do it. I can't do this for you. I've done my exams. That's the good news. The bad news is you have yet to do the exam. And the sooner you start, the sooner you'll finish. And if you don't want to do it, go and do something else. Go to Mumbai and become a Bollywood star or something, you know. And I won't pay to see you. Sorry, I shouldn't be saying things like that. I'm just trying to humor you because
Yes.
Carry on, please. I'm
Yes.
enjoying this, but do ask questions.
Yes, sir. We have Dr. Prabhu Shankar who is asking this question. Due to pandemic situation, the virtual learning which is taking place since 2019-20, students are attending the classes using mobile phones. So he's asking, using mobile phones, and when it is going to be a practical session also, they're attending, they're listening to the practical aspect of an Excel if a finance class is going on. So how do we address this particular scenario?
I'll tell you my own experience. Teaching online has been a real challenge for me. It's like talking to a brick wall, because students switch off their phones, they switch off the video, they mute themselves, and they're out of the room dancing somewhere. And when I say, what does John think? And John is not in the room. What does Mary think? She's not in the room either. Hey, I'm talking to myself. You know why? I'll tell you why. Because the university is recording the lecture, it's going to put it on Learning Central, and they'll say, well, I'm going to the pub now, and I'll watch it when I need to watch it. Subsequently, down the line, when I was discussing, you see, my lectures are building blocks. Lecture number 2 builds on number 1, 3 builds on number 2. So if you miss one, you will be at sea to understand what I'm talking about in a lecture. So when they submit the work online and on market, and I say, did you come to my lecture? No. Did you look at the learning materials? No. Did you watch the recording? No. Well, what do you want me to do? And give me untold happiness to fail you. See if I care. If you can't be bothered, why should I care? Just because you paid the fees doesn't mean we're going to send you an MBA in the post. Anybody? Come on. Who's in charge here? And the rubbish they produce. And then I work in smaller groups. They do business presentations. They have to prepare a business plan. This is the entrepreneurship module. Then I work in Excel. And this year I was doing at least more than twice the work. Either one group member is not present, or 2 of them have not done any work. And there's only one struggling and the others are piggybacking. Whereas in normal conditions, I sign off each individual having done the work. If you don't do it to my standard, this is continuous assessment, you are not going to be part of that group. Because in entrepreneurship, you need 3 things, don't you? You need a fantastic product or a service. Number 2, you've got to have excellent marketing. And number 3, you've got to be absolutely fantastic at your accounts. And if, as an entrepreneur, if you don't understand accounting and you don't even know how a set of accounts is put together, whoa. And you know, as we say, as a very wise man, I said, I can show you some TED Talks. You don't have one individual who can do all 3. It's always a team. All the big companies were teams. You know, I'm good at accounts, I'm good at marketing, I'm good at manufacturing. So the R&D department are not accountants, and the marketing people are not R&D, and the accountant is neither of those 2. You've got to bring together this team, and then you have a successful company. You can't do everything. We need, and the other thing is culture. You see, I found that, to my amazement, in China, with their one-child policy, now they can have 3. One child is looked after by mom and dad and both sets of grandparents. So you've got 6 adults looking after 1 kid. So this kid is told, you will go to school and university and do nothing else. He or she's little emperor or empress. And they have a very strong Confucian way of thinking. You know, they respect their teacher. Guru ki izzat karte hain. And you don't have any hassle with iPhones in their class. Attendance is 100%. They do the homework. They're there on time. They're never late. And they fly through the exams. Now, we in the West and in India, we have a democracy. So everybody's running a riot. At least be in your classroom, stop the riot. And you say, hey, you will not run amok. You're here to learn. Learning needs to take place. And this is how we're going to do it. You're at the center of learning, not us. We were here to guide you, like as a traffic cop. Do this, do this, do this, do this. And this is how I did my MBA at the age of 62. So there you go, triple accredited. Only 1% of business schools in the world have triple accreditation. Now we need to accredit our degrees, bring them to world-class standards. 2 people have raised their hands.
So before that, I have a very representative question from Dr. Ajaz Ahmad Khan.
Yes.
Medicine is also taught on online mode. How efficient that would be these doctors efficient?
Too dangerous. And I had heart surgery, and if my cardiologist who operated on me had learned it online, I wouldn't let him touch me. My late father was an eye surgeon. I used to go into surgery with him just to watch him operate cataract operations and things like that. You cannot do it online, my friend. It's an absolute non-starter. You don't want to turn the doctors taught online. Oh, God help us.
Sir, Amudam Balu wants to ask you a question.
Please do.
Good evening, sir.
Good afternoon.
The session is very well informative, and we are enjoying actually. I have one question. You are teaching very well. If I record your video and I give it to my students, or my students are searching for your video and they are learning from your videos, the class lectures, how much impact will they make on them if they search on their own for some other videos? Because the students are not interested in our classes. Okay, actually, we are scheduling some classes and we are compelling them to attend classes online. But if they search for some other videos, some informative videos regarding their subject, and they are learning on their own, how much impact will it create other than the teachers, the concepts they are learning from some other people, virtual?
You're right. I think it's not working. It hasn't worked for me this year. People watch recordings. They're not challenged, but when you're in the classroom face to face, when you have the eyeball contact, when you're looking at people and their body language, and you say, "Oh, you sit straight," and "Oh, you, that's the fourth time you've yawned. Am I keeping you up?" "Oh, sorry, sir." You know, that is very classic. You cannot replace class face-to-face teaching. People say this is going to be the new norm. You can do it if you have a mature audience. When I was doing my MBA, it was online. The average age was 52. I was 62. You know, I'm not a kid. I'm not going to mess around. So I would pay attention. We would have the day school once a month. And throughout the day, the guy would give you a handout. Go away and read this. And by the way, read this. And don't forget to read that Harvard case study. And then you came up with a pile of homework. It was murder. But these students, you know, these kids, they have this instant coffee mentality. You know, give me an education and I want it yesterday. I'm not prepared to work for it. It doesn't happen like that. You know, it just won't work. So classroom audio recordings depends on the audience. If you got super brats in your class, it ain't gonna work.
Thanks for that, sir. We have Rachna.
Yeah.
Ma'am, you can ask the question.
Thank you. So very good afternoon to you. It's really wonderful getting to hear you, and maybe somebody who is on par, on the same page, because after being in the education and the teaching in the academic industry for about 20 years, I'm calling it an industry because it's become an industry. So about 24, 25 years, I have a question which says we have a strength of about 80 in a classroom. Now, like I had asked you about the Roberts and Susans, how do I get all of them to continue studying and become a Susan at the end of it? How do I get them all to be on par, especially because I have a syllabus to complete? And apart from that, I'm time bound by this semester. So the concepts may be a little strong, but then when I'm so time bound and I'm so stuck within the syllabus parameters, how can I actually even get all of them, 80 in one batch and 200 in 1 year? So how do I manage to get all of them to understand the concepts and come to the same page?
Very difficult. It's a Herculean task. I can tell you, when I'm in the classroom teaching for 2 hours, I'm heavily engaged with one-on-one. And this is very important. But to engage with one-on-one with 120 students or 80 students is a huge challenge. I'm not saying it's easy. You know, we have to reduce our workload. You know, we're wearing so many hats as you are. You know, with admin duties, you're running around doing something else. Most of the time, we're running around like headless chickens. You know, I had the luxury to pick and choose. But wherever I've been, I've told, this is what I'm going to do, and I'm going to do it my way. Are you going to let me do it? You're fine. At the end of it, I produced fantastic results, and their attitude was, well, he's produced the results. He must be doing something right. Let him be. Let him be. The feedback scores were fantastic from the students. And this is what I mean. We need a certain amount of independence. We need wiggle room. We need space to breathe and function. If we are put into straight jackets, it's not going to work. It's not. It's demoralizing for you to start with, personally, you know. And if you're demoralized, you go to a classroom and you want to shoot the whole class in. You don't want to. Like, I was listening to this fantastic lady yesterday and talking about mindfulness and all that. You can only, you have to be feeling nice inside to be able to function in a very loving way. You know, I say to a student, Betaji, let me show you. What do you think? You know, make them feel important. Oh, that's very good. And how would you progress this? Perhaps you could look at this part of the book, and there's an exercise here. You know, it'll tell you this and that, and then you chase them again. Beta, did you do it? And they say, yeah, I did. It make a lot of sense now. You know, but it's got to be a two-way communication, and a very loving one. Very important. Maybe I'll come across as somebody who screams and shouts. I do scream and shout, but they also know I'm a very fair man. You know, and I do care. And they say, well, there are not many professors there who will have a one-on-one with me. You need to be approachable. Be there. You know, I'm always there. I'm at the university till I get kicked out by the security. You know, time is not the essence, but you have to give time to your students, but not be sidetracked by the management who never stand in front of a class to teach. They probably never taught a student in their life. I don't think they ever probably taught their own children. And yet they have the audacity to tell you how to go and teach. That's nonsense. I'm not buying that. Maybe you'll start a strike tomorrow. No, I don't recommend it. Have a dialogue, a constructive dialogue. Make the management feel important and say, look, you know, we think, you know, we can resolve this issue. I was gobsmacked to hear that only 15% of our graduates are employable. And then I read another report from Delhi. They interviewed 3,000 engineers, and only 7% of them had core competences. 7%? Come on. What were the other 93 doing? You know, the students are doing themselves a disfavor. Let me give you another example, which is often I tell my students who are lazy, and I'll warn them, and I say to them, if you go to McDonald's and buy burger and chips, and if they give you lukewarm burger and chips, what are you going to do? It's cost you, I don't know, 200 rupees. You're going to throw it back in their face. So I'm not eating this. I paid you good money. But similarly, you're spending thousands, lakhs of rupees with us. We try to give you a quality education, and you don't want it. Why? Because you skip lectures. Anyway, whose fault is that? We're not at fault. But, you know, as they say, my late father used to say, you can take a horse to the river, but you can't force it to drink. And nothing new. You can't give people what they don't want to eat. So the initiative, the drive has to come from the student. The university management, the vice chancellors, and everybody down from there has to support you. You know, give you unfretted. And if you produce the results, they should leave you alone. Because the proof of the pudding is the employers will queue up to recruit your graduates. And they say, hey, That's the university we need to go to. Oh, I've ignited fear, but ignited learning, sorry.
Thank you, sir.
Amritsar, many of them have been inspired with you and our YouTube attendee. Since we are online, you're live on YouTube as well. So one of the attendees asked, Shantanu Jain from, he's asking about, does age matter in academics and faculty position? So what's your opinion on that?
Age is no barrier to learning. I'm always doing courses. My wife is absolutely fed up and says, enough courses now. But, you know, it's a joy of learning. I walk the talk. I tell my students, look, I do exams. And some of the professors at the university, you know, say to me, oh, you're not still doing exams, are you? Oh, God forbid. Anyway, why are you such a chicken, you know? Why? And when I go to an exam hall, when I see an old man in the middle of the classroom, and you know, you say, you don't like me? Don't look at me. I don't wear designer clothes. Don't like my clothes? Don't look at me. If you don't like my car, don't look at my car. Stop worrying about people around you. You know, I've got courses lined up. I did a course with the Open University recently on online teaching. Do you know, I was amazed at how much research has gone into that. I was flabbergasted. And the net effect of that course, it was a 6-week course, was that one, the technology we're using should be spot on. If the students haven't got the technology, it won't work. And two, the mental health of the student, which is very important. Now, our students are snowflake generation. You know, you say something to them and they go running to mom, mommy, you shouted at me. Oh yeah. Compare that to my mom. My mom would say, well, you must have done something stupid. And that's the difference. So, sorry.
As a last question for the session, Sunil Kardian wants to ask you a question. Please go ahead, sir.
Hello, sir.
Hello, good afternoon.
So my good afternoon, sir. So my specific question is that, like in India, UGC have come up with a 4-quadrant approach, in which specifically I'll ask first two quadrant, that is preparing e-tutorials and e-contents prior we start the semester, right? And during the pandemic, all faculty members were working from home. It has like acquiring new skills where we are by ourselves, editor, composer, director, everything, using our own resources. Sir, I just want to ask you that when we are all supposed to put up all the e-tutorials where we are teaching 4-5 courses and e-content before, it's like flooding a lot of content to the students, because they are also supposed to read it for the discussion which will happen in the class, maybe right now online. If they are also being they are having 7 to 8 courses, so how is it practically possible that they should come up with all those e-tutorial, e-content, read it and come into the class? So a very challenging job for a teacher as well as a student. So just would like to have an input from your side, because in India, every university is working on it and they have already started.
I couldn't agree more with you. It is a disaster in the making. And if we go down this road, we're going to achieve very little. We need to stop. Less is more. Do 2 or 3 subjects, but do them in depth. If you're working to that sort of level, it's going to be a spoonful of this and a spoonful of that. Surface learning, I can tell you that now. That's my experience. I'm quite happy to take more questions. I'm in no rush to go anywhere.
Nikita wants to ask you a question, last question.
The grading system has been turned off by this national education policy. What would you suggest that we should, as a faculty, as a teacher, or as a lecturer, we should take call for these students which are coming out of school after pandemic? So let me reframe my question. After pandemic, if a student from a school comes to a college as a lecturer, what should we do, or what should we do as the best teacher to bring them into a field of entrepreneurship or venture development or innovation from the very first beginning, or from the very first semester?
Oh, it's very difficult to answer that. There is no one prescription. Go away and do ABC, EFG, and it's the road to success. It is, a lot of this is trial and error. Let me explain this. I tell my students that each and every one of them is a scholarship student, each and every one of them. By that I mean they have the aptitude, they have the ability. What they need to bring to the table, what they need to bring into the classroom is their attitude. You can be a super bright student, but if you don't do the homework and don't attend lectures, you will fail. On the other hand, you can take an average student or even a below average student who's conscientious, applies himself or herself, attends all the lectures, does the homework, puts in the hours, and gets a distinction. It's all to do with attitude. Where you say failure is not an option for me, and that becomes your driving force. Failure is not an option for me. I will mug up the textbook and I will do all the questions. I don't need my teacher to tell me. He's told me by this month we will have done these topics, by this month we'll have done these topics, and by this month we'll have done these topics, and by this month we're going to prepare for the exams. And you're going to do an external exam with a world-class institution. And the student feels good. Hey, I've achieved a fantastic level. And when he goes for the job interview, the employer is impressed. Yes, this student has left university with the graduate attributes. He can communicate. He has soft skills. He has the knowledge. He understands the application of the knowledge, and so on and so forth. We need a complete rethink. With the government, forgive me, I haven't looked at all the new education policy. I've just looked at them very briefly. Handing down, just go away and do this is not the answer. We have a broad direction, yes. Governments are governments. Yesterday I was listening to this fantastic gentleman who was an entrepreneur. What was it, Bamboo India? And I tell you, I was so disheartened. Twice or thrice he said in his talk that talking to government agencies was a complete and utter waste of time. That's governments for you. It's not governments who create jobs, it's entrepreneurs who create jobs. It's entrepreneurs who take risks, who create wealth. Governments create infrastructure projects like building motorways, hospitals, roads. But it's people like you and me who create, who take big risks and go into business and they fail. And the failure rate is 80% within the first 2 years. You lose your shirt, you lose your home. But it's these people who make all the difference. So I think you need to have a very honest heart-to-heart talk with the powers that be and say, look, this is where we need to do, this is where we need to go, and this is how we need to do it. And, if Jo dar gaya wo mar gaya, as Gabbar used to say in Chole. I couldn't agree more with that. In fact, it's my motto, What are you afraid of? What are you afraid of? If you produce the end results by the methodology that I have, I'm bragging now. When at university, I have migration of students from other lecturers into my class. My class are overfull and filling and spilling. And the other lecturers are saying, where are my students? Oh, they're in Ahmed's class. And I'm not very popular, taking their students away. But students will work with their feet. And when they see that they're getting value for money. They're getting a value, an education that they appreciate. But only if you put them in charge, put them in the driving seat and say, hey, you decided to do the MBA. You chose to come here. So let's do this. It's costing you a fortune. So and make them feel important and say, I'm here to help you. But if you can't help yourself, then you can hardly blame us. We're not magicians who are going to wave a magic wand and transfer all that knowledge into that thick skull of yours. You have to transfer it yourself by active learning, doing all the activities which engage you purposefully and challenge you and stretch you. That's how it's going to work.
Thank you so much, Amrit sir. You've been motivating us. You have ignited a lot of thoughts in us. You've been a great inspiration to think in different directions. Your presence means a lot today for us. Thank you so much, and Dhanyavad sir. Thank you so much.
I'm very touched. And can I just say one last thing before you go? Please, I've said this to Anila ji. My name is Amrit, not Amrit sir, because Amrit sir is the Golden Temple in Punjab.
You've corrected me before as well.
You can call me plain Amrit, and I'll be very happy.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
Ab sabka dhanyavad aur namaskar.
Yes, sir. So this brings us to the end of the third day of AICT-sponsored 5-day FDP on bridging the gap between academia and industry through advanced pedagogical techniques. I hope we have a lot of takeaways from Amrit's presentation today, and with more of insights and illuminating session. Our session tomorrow will start with Dr. Ijaz Ahmed, Professor of South Carolina, USA, Dr. Charan Singh, ex-IMB faculty, non-executive managing director of Punjab and Sindh Bank, founder eGrowth Foundation, and Mr. Mohsin Khan, director, SkillsGo India Training and Development, Bangalore. See you all tomorrow by 10. Take care. Stay safe.
Before we leave, dear participants, please make sure that there's a special request that has been made by the second speaker for tomorrow. That is Dr. Charan Singh. He has requested that you should read the RBI guidelines before attending his session, because his session will be weaved around it. So please read the RBI guidelines and come for the session. Thank you so much, everyone. Take care and have a great day.
Thank you. Bye-bye.